Everyone, and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're talking about The Boys episode 6, and so far this season has progressed quite nicely. This episode was both entertaining and revealing. I'm always amazed at how much more gross the show can get. I could have gone the rest of my life without ever knowing about Webweaver. He was proof that not all soups are made equal. Finally find out that Butcher's friend is indeed imaginary. And Butcher has been absolutely fascinating this season because he's been battling his angel and his demon, played out by his wife and this friend that he allegedly abandoned to die. And the issue that Butcher is having is he's trying to reconcile two different parts of himself. On one hand, he wants to be a good husband and do right by his wife. On the other hand, he wants to kill Homelander. And unfortunately, there's no way of killing Homelander without triggering a massive genocide. And I finally caught up with Gen V. Fantastic show. This is a drug they'd been working on for some time. And it seems like they have gotten it to the point where it is not only just powerful enough to kill Homelander, but it's powerful enough to kill all soups. And that's kind of the decision that Butcher has to make. And Butcher has always known that in order to kill Homelander, something really bad was going to happen. There's just no way of killing him in isolation. And storing him in some freezer like they did Soldier Boy, it just would not satisfy his lust for revenge. And I've always felt that Butcher is basically another Homelander. He just feels that his reasons are more justified. We've watched him season after season try to compromise, try to play with others, but he still has this need to be in control. He still has this need to have the final say. And the way that this episode was going, it really does feel like his demons are winning. And in terms of the boys, they definitely did a lot better this episode. And I thought this whole party scene was absolutely hilarious and wild with the 1% of the world. Thinking watching them mingle with all these awful people. If they really wanted to change the world, they could have just thrown a grenade into that room and just it may have solved all their issues. And through this party, we get some insight into Homelander and Sister Sage's sort of grand plan. It seems that they are in process of using Tech Knight's prisons in order to set up what will be internment camps for anyone they deem to be enemy of the state. Homelander and Sister Sage are really intent on this coup, and they've already started working on the plan. However, they may be jumping the gun just a little bit. I thought this episode was really crucial in terms of Homelander's character, because watching him try to appeal to this 1%, the most powerful people in the country, you could tell that he was way out of his depth and he just didn't know what he was saying or doing. He was totally embarrassed, and I think it really dawned on him that he's completely powerless on his own. And I don't think Homelander fully appreciates the way that he's been indoctrinated with Vought propaganda. A lot of the talking points he was spewing out, he truly believed. A lot of it was just instilled in him through Vought TV, through growing up in these labs. So he doesn't really know anything else. And watching him passionately speak to these rich douchebags, he really thought he was convincing them, but he wasn't saying anything. And he was almost just shocked at their indifference. And the reason that he was just unable to really provide them with any real answers is because he doesn't really know what to do outside of being a celebrity superhero. He's not ready to be leader of the free world. And I thought Vicky, I think Vicky is such a great character because she's such a great contrast to someone like Homelander, because she was taught by Stan how to navigate the corporate and political world. So she knew exactly what to say. And I really do think that corporations are indeed the real superhero. They literally play into people's dreams and their aspirations. And these massive corporations, outside of Vought, there's so many companies that we can name that are very similar. They don't just sell products, they sell ideas. Either you dream of working for one of these companies or you're rooting for them. We've given them more importance than they actually deserve. I think Homelander is such a great example of that because he's literally unable to separate his identity, his talking points from the company. He really doesn't see how they're one and the same. Watching Homelander, it was very clear that without Sister Sage and without Vicky, he would be totally lost. And even if he does get this coup that he's always dreamed about, he there's no way that he could maintain power. Like, he's essentially just a figurehead. He doesn't know how to actually get people to do what they want him to do on a mass scale. To make matters worse, Vicky saw it immediately. She knows that he's weak and she knows that he's dumb. Like, he tries desperately to stay ahead of things. Like, he knows about Stan. He knows that she has something to do with it, but she's not giving him anything. She doesn't trust him. She's not giving him any more information than he needs. And outside of maybe exposing her as a soup, he doesn't really have anything else on her to keep any control of her. And I think this party, he realized that he needs her more than she needs him. Like, he's a lot more disposable than maybe he would like to believe. And Vicky is very smart. She's very hard to control. I don't think she makes for a good dummy president. Like, she has too much independence. I think for the time being, Homelander just has to hope for the best, because this was like, you could tell he was just desperate at the end, and he wasn't the only one. In terms of the boys, as I said, they did make progress this episode, but they were still desperate, and they're still like 100 steps behind Homelander. I thought the whole bit with Tech Knight was absolutely hilarious. I finally caught up on Gen V, as I mentioned earlier, and I did not know Tech Knight was such a deviant. Like, he is a nasty little man, and I guess he's like Sherlock Holmes on steroids. I thought it was really funny how he was Huey's favorite superhero. And I think Tech Knight is a great example of why you should never meet your heroes, because this is what happens. And so the boys managed to weasel their way into this party. And the only reason they do that is through this character called Webweaver. And I could smell that suit from like a mile away. It was absolutely disgusting. And the whole time this episode is going on, I kept waiting for them to be found out, because it was very clear that Homelander clocked that there was something wrong. But he was so distracted by this 1% that he wasn't really like paying attention as much as he probably should have. And this is the episode where maybe Homelander might start to lose trust in Sister Sage, because the breach at this party was massive. Right, like Tech Knight was not only stormed, but he was killed. Like, and Sister Sage, we did get some insight into her character, because again, her motivations are not clear. I don't think she likes Homelander that much. I think she's using him as a vehicle to maybe get her own revenge. The most telling conversations was between Sister Sage and Vicky, and she mentions her sick grandmother, who was a former Black Panther, and how she was very sick, and even though she found the cure to help her, they basically laughed it off. And as a result, her grandmother died in extreme pain. And the way that Sister Sage told that story, I definitely think she told Vicky to rile her up, but I definitely think it was a true story. And maybe I was thinking like Sister Sage might have a lot in common with someone like Butcher, where she has such a disdain for humans in general because of her own experiences, that Homelander might be the perfect vehicle to get her own revenge, wipe these humans out. Theoretically, as she said, she could cure cancer, she could cure AIDS, but like, why should she? When she did offer, she was dismissed. When we're first introduced to Sister Sage, she's reading, she's studying, and it seems like she's someone who really understands human beings and what triggers them and how to kind of motivate them. Whether or not she gets her revenge or she, gets this end result that she's looking for is really dependent on Homelander's ego, which at the moment is being played on by Firecracker. I think Firecracker is such a great character because she's almost unbearable to watch. Like, I find her to be just ick. I hate her costume. I hate her hair. Like, she's just unbearable, and she has this sense of importance about her. And she's now at a point where she has millions of followers. Like, her superpower is clout. And she doesn't seem to really appreciate how replaceable she is. Like, she seems to feel that she's more important than she really is. And I thought this conversation that Firecracker had with Homelander about having millions of followers and him putting her on paralleled really well to the conversation that Deep had with Black Noir. And that conversation that Deep had was absolutely insane. The fact that Black Noir had his mask off, like, shout out to him. He was really fine. Like, was I the only one that clocked that? I'm like, this dude is fine. And he was just annoyed. And Deep basically gives him this convoluted story about how old Black Noir really got off on murder, and how murder and violence equals power. And basically what he was telling him is that the benefits of being part of the Seven is immunity. You get away with whatever you want whenever you want. I think what people like Deep and Firecracker don't really understand, and maybe something Black Noir was clocking, is a lot of this immunity that they have, a lot of this clout that they have, has been given to them by the suits at Vought and can be taken away from them at any time. For example, Firecracker could easily incite violence on her platform, but she needs the green light from Vought to do it. Like, as much power as they have, they're limited. And you saw that with Homelander's speech, right? Like, they're essentially dogs on a leash. They don't really know how to get out of that leash. The character we see trying is A-Train. And I thought it was so funny that he ran to Toronto to talk to Marvel. Like, he's terrified. He's terrified because he knows the consequences. A lot of what he's been able to get away with is thanks to the Seven and thanks to Homelander. And he knows the minute that they find out that he is the snitch, everything that he's done up until this point will be erased. And by the end of this episode, we get a turning point. Firecracker basically tells Homelander that she'd been injecting herself with enough drugs to produce milk. And Homelander's reaction when she squirted him with milk should get him the Emmy alone. Like, that was fantastic acting. Like, his face, I was like, I needed to rewind. Like, the whole scene of her breastfeeding him with the American flag in the background, like, he's a child. And this nation is so unstable. The reason that Homelander is not attracted to her is because he can have her. One thing we know about Homelander is that he likes to take things that don't belong to him. However, he will make exceptions if it flatters his ego, which in this case Firecracker's act did. And I think his ego is so big and so sensitive that this might be enough. Like, she might have done enough to take over for Sage. I'm not really sure. Like, Homelander says that he wants all these things and he wants to rule, but he just doesn't have the ego to do it. He's too sensitive. He cannot take criticism. And unfortunately, if you want to be leader of the free world, you're going to have to move a lot smarter, right? You can't be triggered by every little thing. That's how the episode ends. So far, I'm really enjoying this season. The only thing I'm not really sure about is Frenchie's storyline. He's in jail and we haven't seen him. So I'm not sure where this is going or why it's going there. I think they've kind of wasted Frenchie in a lot of ways, but who knows, maybe it'll pick back up. I think they definitely could have done a lot more with Kamiko because we don't really find out about this trafficking thing. Like, we never really come back to it. And so, I don't know, they kind of started these side stories, but they never really finished them. But overall, very enjoyable. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.